This video is on graphing coordinates on our coordinate plane and reflecting points in that coordinate plane. So first we have just plotting our regular points on the coordinate grid. Coordinates always come in pairs. So like our first example here has the point -3, 5. So you have two coordinates. A good way to remember it is the first coordinate is always your x, the second coordinate is always your y. Think of it kind of like the alphabet. X comes before y. So the x is always first, then the y. The x is your horizontal axis. So the first number tells you where to go along the horizontal axis. The second number is your y. That's your vertical axis going up and down. So first number tells you how many to go left or right. Second number tells you where to go up and down. Where those two match, or where they meet up with each other, that's where your point goes. So in this first example, they went left to -3, they went up +5, and that's where they got their point M. Whenever you place a point, you're always going to give it a name, so that way you know what it was that you were trying to plot. So let's see a couple of these in action here. The grid on my coordinate plane here is a little washed out, but we can still kind of figure out where the points would be. First we want point P at -2, 4. So again, first number is my x. So that means I'm going to find -2 going left and right. -2 is to the left, to -2. Second number is 4. That's for my y-axis. That's going up and down. So I'm going to go up 4, and that's where I place my point at -2, 4. Let me place that a little bit better there. It was the point P, so I label it point P. So let's try the next one. Q is at 0, -4. So 0 is my x. That means I'm going to stay right in the middle. I'm not going to go left or right. I'm going to stay right at 0. And then I'm going to go -4 for y. That means down to -4. And I'm going to call that point Q. So I went left or right 0, meaning I stayed right in the middle. And then I went down to -4. Next one, point R, -1/2, -2 1/2. So for our fractions and our decimals, you'll have to do a little bit of estimating. My first number is -1/2, so that's my x. That's going left and right. So I'm going to go left to -1/2. So right about in there. And then I'm going to go up, I'm going to go down to -2 1/2. Second number is my y. Negative means go down, so I'm going to go down 2 1/2. It's going to be kind of in between the 2 and -2 and -3, and that's where I'm going to place my point R. So I went left half of a spot to -1/2, and then down 2 1/2. Along with our points, we can do something called reflecting the points. Basically, think of it like looking in the mirror. You're standing in front of the mirror, your reflection looks like it's kind of standing behind the mirror. It's kind of a mirror opposite of where you're at. So a reflection, like in example number 3, says they have the point 2, -4. They want to reflect it across the x-axis. So down here was their point 2, -4. Here's our x-axis. So for a reflection, think of it as if this were a sheet of paper, if we folded it right along that x-axis, or we folded along that line, where would our point A match up with the top half? Well, point A was 4 units down, -4, so the reflection is going to be in the exact opposite direction. It's going to be 4 units in the positive direction, so it's going to pop up to +4. Reflection is basically find that line you're reflecting over. In this case, I was 4 units below, so my reflection is going to be 4 units above. It's kind of the exact opposite direction it was before. So let's see that in action for ourselves. Let's look at these two examples at the bottom. First it says graph point C, -1, 5. So first number is -1, that's my x. So that means I'm going to go left and right. So I'm going to go left to -1. And then +5 means I'm going to go up +5. So there's my point C. And you don't have to draw in the arrows of how you got to the point. I'm just doing it to help us kind of visualize how we got there. So I went left 1, and then up 5. It says I want to reflect in the x-axis. So here's my x-axis. Sometimes it's good to kind of shade it in so we can kind of see. So think of it as folding the top half of the piece of paper down until it matches up with the bottom half. So C is going to go from the top, it's going to flip to the bottom. So a good way to think of it is, right now, C is 5 units above, so the reflection is going to be 5 units below. We're just going to go in the exact opposite direction, same number of spots. So we're going to call this point C, and then because it's the reflection, it's the new version of my point, I'm going to put that little prime or that little tick mark next to it. We would call it C prime. It's kind of the new version of C. I know where I started at point C, and I know where the reflection was because of that little tick mark there. So let's take a look at the next one. I'll kind of clear out some of my work here. Next one says, graph the point D, 2, and then 3.5. So first number is my x, so I'm going to go to the right over to 2. Second number is 3.5. It's positive, so that means I'm going to go up 3.5, kind of in between 3 and 4, and that's point D. The problem says I want to reflect in the y-axis. So here's my y-axis. So pretend I was going to fold my piece of paper across there. Where would that left-hand side match up with point D on the right-hand side? Well, it's going to be the exact same distance, but just in the opposite direction. Right now, D is 2 units to the right, so I want to go 2 units to the left, and that's where I'm going to find point D prime. So a reflection is just the exact opposite direction over whichever axis you're reflecting. So in this case, I was reflecting over the y-axis, so I went the same number of spots on the opposite side of the y-axis. Last piece. In example 5 here, you'll notice they plotted some points, did some reflections, and then looked at where did they end up? What kind of shape did they make out of those points when they were all done? You'll notice up here that they made a trapezoid out of their shape. So let's try one of these ourselves. Here we have problem G. It says Ms. Shaw is drawing a map of the school. Her room is at -3, 4, and the gym is at 3, 4. So let's place those points first. Her room is at -3, 4. So first number tells me to go left to right. So I'm going to go left to -3 and then up to +4. So here is her room. Then it says the gym is at 3, 4. So this time I'm going to go right to +3 and then up to 4. And here is my gym. Then it says the library is a reflection of 3, 4 across the x-axis. So here's my point, 3, 4. And I want to reflect over the x-axis. So I'm going to fold that top part down to match up with the bottom. So the gym was 4 units up, so the new point is going to be 4 units down. So that's going to be my library. So I reflected over that x-axis. And then the last part says, and then it says this point is reflected across the y-axis to find the office. So I take my new point here, and I'm going to reflect it over the y-axis. So pretend if I were to fold that piece of paper over, that right side would get matched up with the left-hand side. So here I am 3 units to the right, so I'm going to go 3 units to the left, and that's where I would find my office. So I've placed my 4 points. There's one last piece to my question here. Remember, you always got to make sure you answered all parts of the question. Last part says, what figure is graphed on the map? Meaning, if I were to connect my points, what shape would I get? So go ahead and connect our points here, and you'll notice that I made a rectangle. 4-sided figure with 4 right angles. So in this case, all 4 of those points combine together to create a rectangle.